April 26, 1944. In the warm black waters east of Luzon, a Japanese convoy pushed slowly south, 14 transports strung out in a wavering line, behind a thin screen of escorts. Their hulls rode low under impossible weight. Thousands of soldiers, stacks of ammunition crates, artillery pieces bolted to the decks, and the armored vehicles of Japan's 18th and 20th Divisions. Deep inside the holds, tanks were chained to steel floors that vibrated from the constant thrum of engines. Above deck, troops crowded railings, watching the night pass like a wall of ink. They believed they were sailing to reinforce New Guinea, where the Imperial Army's defenses were collapsing under Allied pressure. Officers whispered that these tanks might turn the tide, that if they reached the front intact, the fighting could continue for months. What none of them understood was that the route they trusted was already compromised. Days earlier, American codebreakers had traced their departure, their escort composition, and their projected course. 2 submarines, the Submarine Jack and the Submarine Gurnard, had slipped silently into the Luzon Strait, waiting precisely where mathematics and intelligence said the convoy must pass. The Japanese escorts struggled against the sea. Their sonar sets flickered and died beneath the pounding surf. Their radar, where it existed at all, had blind spots measured in miles. Lookouts scanned the darkness with binoculars, their vision reduced to rain, spray, and uncertainty. Nothing suggested danger. No periscope glinted in the moonlight. No torpedo wake cut the surface. Only the low warm wind and the steady hum of engines. But beneath that surface, the submarines waited like shadows with teeth. Inside the steel hull of the Submarine Jack, Captain Thomas Michael Dykers studied his radar and sonar returns with practiced calm. He did not know the exact cargo of the convoy, but he knew its size, its speed, and its value. Any Japanese convoy that large in 1944 meant reinforcements Japan could not afford to lose. Through the red glow of the control room, the radar screen pulsed with the echoes of ships creeping steadily closer. Each sweep revealed more detailed displacement, formation spacing, escort pattern. The convoy was a map drawn in green light. The submarine Gernard, operating several miles to the east, tracked the same pattern with equal precision. Her sonar operators listened to the layered rhythm of engines, separating transports from escorts by sound alone. The ocean carried those vibrations for miles, revealing what the Japanese bridge crews believed the night concealed. On the Japanese side, confidence slowly curdled into unease. The wind increased. Swells rose. Ships drifted out of line and had to be signaled back with flashing lamps. The escorts shifted positions to tighten the screen. Lookouts sensed the tension growing around them. But the real danger remained unseen. It lay beneath the waves, watching, closing, preparing. Shortly after midnight, Captain Dykers brought the Submarine Jack to attack depth. The periscope rose into the black water, cutting through waves that slapped at its lens. Through the blur of rain and darkness, the silhouettes of transports appeared. Massive, slow, unaware. The submariner's instinct tightened inside him. There was no need to wait for dawn. In submarine warfare, hesitation was the same as surrender. The torpedo data computer rattled quietly as bearings and ranges were fed into it. Crewmen in the forward torpedo room steadied themselves as ballast shifted, and the boat aligned for a bow shot. The lead transport drifted into position, her bulk crawling across the periscope lines. Then the moment froze. The torpedo tubes flooded. The captain exhaled, and the order came. 4 torpedoes left the submarine, Jack with a low metallic shudder that traveled the length of the hull. They accelerated into darkness, leaving only faint trails that quickly vanished in the swell. Inside the submarine, the men counted seconds, each heartbeat a measure of distance across the black water. Then came the first explosion, a deep, rolling detonation that echoed across the strait. The second followed almost immediately, brighter and sharper. The torpedoes struck one of the largest troopships in the column, a vessel weighted with soldiers, tanks, and vehicles for the New Guinea front. The blast tore open the hull beneath the waterline. Compartments collapsed. Men sleeping below deck died without ever waking. The ship began to list sharply, alarms ringing through the corridors. Before the echoes faded, the Submarine Jack was already turning for another target. A transport carrying hundreds of Army engineers drifted helplessly across her sights. Another spread of torpedoes roared away, and within minutes, the second ship was falling out of formation, smoke pouring from her stern. Panic rippled through the Japanese column. Escorts surged forward, racing toward the imagined shape of a submarine, dropping depth charges in frantic patterns. But the ocean swallowed their attacks. The Submarine Jack had already slipped beneath them and vanished into deeper water. The convoy struggled to reform. Soldiers clung to rails as the ships zigzagged violently. Some transports stopped entirely, unsure where the submarine was or whether more torpedoes were coming. But the convoy was not alone. Miles away, the submarine Gurnard watched the chaos deepen and moved in for her own strike. Captain Charles Andrews Welchel ordered periscope depth. The lens knifed through the surface, water streaming down its narrow frame. Through the scope, he could see faint fire glowing on the horizon, one of the ships hit by the Submarine Jack, now burning. But closer targets filled the view. A long, high-sided transport, her decks stacked with artillery pieces, trucks, and men trying to regain formation, drifted into the firing solution. Torpedoes launched. The submarine rocked gently as the fish left their tubes. Moments later, another heavy detonation split the night. The transport shuddered under the impact, her midsection folding inward. Steam and smoke erupted from ruptured pipes. Within minutes, she was dead in the water, listing hard to port. But the attack did not end there. Gernard's sonar picked up another large vessel. Very large, its engine signature unmistakably that of a tanker or troop-laden freighter. Welchel maneuvered into firing position. More torpedoes fired, more explosions erupted, and another Japanese ship began to sink. In less than an hour, the combined assault of Jack and Gernard had torn open the convoy's northern flank, sinking multiple transports and scattering the formation across miles. Yet this was only the beginning of what history would remember as one of Japan's worst reinforcement disasters. The next blow came in July, when another massive convoy, Mi-11, entered the Luzon Strait, carrying thousands of soldiers and the tanks and vehicles of the 2nd Tank Division. Waiting for them were the submarines Parche, Steelhead, and Hammerhead. On the night of July 31st, in seas blackened by monsoon clouds, the submarine Parche, under Lieutenant Commander Lawson Patton Ramage, executed one of the most daring surface attacks in the history of submarine warfare. Running on the surface at high speed, Parche knifed into the formation itself, weaving between transports so closely that crewmen on the Japanese decks could have thrown tools at her. Radar painted every ship with perfect clarity. Torpedo after torpedo left her tubes, streaking into the heart of the convoy. One struck the transport Yoshino Maru, a ship carrying more than 5,000 soldiers, and the tanks meant for the defense of Luzon and the southern Philippines. The explosion that followed lit the night with a bloom of flame that towered above the decks. Compartments flooded instantly. Ammunition cooked off in violent bursts. Yoshino Maru capsized in minutes, taking most of her passengers down with her. Another torpedo hit Fuso Maru, a transport loaded with tanks, railway carriages, and hundreds of men. The blast buckled her hull. As she listed sharply in the storm, her deck cargo broke free. Trucks, artillery pieces, and vehicles sliding across the deck and crushing soldiers who tried to abandon ship. She rolled under, disappearing into black water that swallowed both men and machines. Meanwhile, the submarine Steelhead struck Koei Maru, a tanker loaded with fuel and troops. The explosion tore the ship nearly in half. Flames raced across the ocean's surface as oil poured from the ruptured tanks. Hundreds of men leapt into burning water. The submarine Hammerhead hunted the stragglers, torpedoing Manco Maru and adding to the catastrophic losses. By dawn, 4 major ships carrying tanks, vehicles, and troops had been sunk. Thousands were dead. The armored battalion, meant to reinforce the Philippine defenses, had been annihilated at sea. The sea floor of the Luzon Strait had become a cemetery of tanks, trucks, ammunition, and men who never even saw the battlefield they were meant to defend. In Tokyo, the shock was profound. Reports of the Take Ichi disaster, the sinking of more than 4,000 soldiers in April, had barely been absorbed when the Mi-11 disaster arrived. Now another tank formation was gone before it touched land. Japan's high command realized the unthinkable. It could no longer move armies across the sea. Every convoy that left port did so under the shadow of submarine hunters that could track it through storms, through darkness, through oceans once believed too vast to patrol. The destruction continued into late 1944, each loss tightening the news around Japan's collapsing fronts. Armored reinforcements vanished. Troop convoys were torn apart. Tank divisions arrived at battlefields as hollow remnants of what they had been on paper. On the sea floor, hundreds of tanks still rest today, preserved in rust and silence, the metal ghosts of armies that never reached their war. For the Americans who fought in those submarines, the victories felt both immense and strangely distant. They fought their battles by sound and by echo, by the pulses of radar and the green glow of sonar screens. They rarely saw the ships they destroyed. They only felt the vibrations of explosions and heard the breaking of steel through the hull, distant and muted. But they knew what those explosions meant. Every detonation was a Japanese tank sinking before it ever fired a shot. Every torpedo hit was one less formation waiting on some future beachhead. In the end, the submarines did not simply sink ships. They strangled an empire. They erased the armies Japan needed to survive, and they turned the sea routes of 1944 into corridors of death, from which no reinforcement convoy could safely pass. When historians later wrote the story of Japan's defeat, they pointed to the great carrier battles, the island landings, the firebombing campaigns. But in the deep waters of the Luzon Strait and the South China Sea, another story lay hidden, a story of tanks and men who disappeared into the night without ever seeing the enemy that destroyed them, a story of silent hunters that waited in darkness and struck with mathematical precision, a story of the night the United States Navy's submarines annihilated the tank convoys of Japan, not in one battle, but in a relentless series of blows that shattered the last hopes of an army fighting for survival. And in those dark waters, under layers of silt and rust, the ruins of those lost convoys still rest, a silent monument to the truth the Pacific learned in 1944. The deadliest battlefield of the year did not lie on land. It lay beneath the waves. Today, the rusting hulls that sleep beneath the Luzon Strait and the South China Sea are more than relics. They are reminders of how entire armies can vanish without firing a shot, how the fate of nations can shift in the space of a single night. And these forgotten battlefields, hidden far below the waves, still have stories left to tell. If you want more untold chapters from the Pacific, more operations lost to time, more battles fought in shadows, more moments where history balanced on the edge of a torpedo's wake, then make sure you stay with us. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next descent into the forgotten depths of World War II. Because as long as we keep exploring these waters, their ghosts will keep speaking. And the stories they carry deserve to be heard.